Do you know the real rules of night security? Not the ones written in the manual, but the true rules. Never go near the fifth floor. Don't ask too many questions. Never look inside a delivery you don't know? Then you're lucky. But if you listen to this story now, you'll know the rules. And once you know them, you can never go back to a normal night shift. My name is Michael Harris. I'm 60 years old, a former military security guard. I served 2 tours in the Iraq War and saw countless things in the desert. But what I experienced 3 weeks ago in an office building north of Winnipeg left a deeper scar on my heart than any horror on the battlefield. On the battlefield, I could see the enemy. I heard gunshots, saw the smoke of explosions, and smelled the metallic tang of blood. But the fear had a shape. It was a fear I could understand. It was simply humans killing humans. However, what I encountered in that building was beyond human comprehension. Something unexplainable by logic existed there. This is the price I paid for learning all 3 rules I should never have broken. The image of that woman is still burned into my memory, and the smell of burning ozone that I continue to smell every night. As a veteran, I've dealt with PTSD. What I learned in military counseling was to analyze, understand, and accept fear. The fear of the battlefield was man-made, and therefore understandable by humans. But the experience in that building rendered all my training and experience useless. Psychology, tactics, survival skills, nothing worked. Because what I faced existed outside the human concept. Normally, my job was boring. And that's exactly what I wanted. At 60, I'm not looking for an exciting job anymore. I had more than enough excitement in the military. For 20 years after my discharge, I deliberately pursued mediocrity. I chose a quiet, predictable life to dull the memories of the battlefield. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., drink coffee, and read the local newspaper. I believed that a regular life would repair something broken by the war. For 20 years since my discharge, I had deliberately chosen an ordinary life. I lived alone in a small apartment, watched sports on TV, and went fishing on weekends. 5 years after losing my wife, Sarah, to cancer, all I needed was quiet. I still remember Sarah's last words clearly.
Michael, you're still fighting. But the war is over now. Find peace.
After her death, I tried to live by her words. The boring night security job was part of that. No problems, no danger, no decisions to make. Just being there. That was the peace I sought. But ironically, that choice for peace led me to the greatest terror of my life. My security company, Night Watch Security, primarily handled night shifts for abandoned or empty buildings, chasing away intruders, watching out for copper thieves, deterring youngsters looking for graffiti. That was my job. But the assignment I received 3 weeks ago was different.
No special instructions. Just a 6-month contract.
My boss, Jim, said, handing me only an address. No detailed explanations, no instructions for special equipment, just a piece of paper. It is 25 years in this industry. It was the first time Jim had given such a vague assignment. Usually, he'd hand over a thick file with detailed floor plans of the building, a list of critical areas to secure, and emergency contact information. Jim's expression also bothered me. I'd never seen him so flustered. He kept drumming his fingers on his desk and avoided eye contact.
You can refuse this assignment, Michael,
he said, but he didn't tell me why. Who's the client? I asked.
That's not clear. The request came through a law firm. Payment has already been made up front.
Jim looked puzzled.
Michael, if anything strange happens, call me immediately.
Looking back, That was the first warning. The building was in a place that shouldn't exist. An hour's drive north of Winnipeg. A solitary 5-story office building stood just barely visible from the highway. There were no other buildings around, and it was far from the nearest town. Even in a sparsely populated area of Canada, I couldn't think of any economic reason to build an office building in such an isolated location. Why and who built an office here in the middle of nowhere? When I checked its coordinates on my GPS, I initially suspected equipment failure. The map showed it as empty forest land, but when I arrived on site, the building was indeed there. It was as if the map had been deliberately falsified. As I approached the building, the sense of unease grew. The parking lot asphalt looked relatively new, yet the building's exterior was stained as if neglected for years. Some windows were cracked, and the main entrance glass door was taped off with no entry signs. At 6 p.m., I stepped inside the building for the first time. Using the key card I'd been given, I opened the lobby door to reveal a reception area dimly lit by fluorescent lights. My car was the only one in the parking lot. There was a reception desk in the lobby, but no one was there. An old computer and phone sat on the desk, but neither was powered on. There were traces on the wall where a company logo had been displayed but was now removed. Only a faded rectangular outline indicated that something had once been there. And the moment I stepped into the building, I noticed the smell of ozone, like just before a rainstorm. Mixed with it, a faint scent of something burned or charred. It was subtle, but unmistakably there. From my military experience, I was sensitive to smells. The smell of gunpowder, the smell of blood, the smell of death. But this smell was unlike anything I had ever encountered. This wasn't just a bad odor. It was like an animalistic warning that something was fundamentally wrong. It was similar to the instinctive fear I felt approaching a minefield during my military days. My body sensed danger and was screaming at me to run. On the first night, I took the elevator to check the lights on the 5th floor. There were 2 elevators in the lobby. The left one activated with my key card, while the right one didn't respond. The inside of the left elevator was standard, with buttons for floors 1 to 5. There was no button for a basement floor. When I pressed the button for the 5th floor, the doors closed, but the elevator didn't move. After a moment of silence, a crackling, static-like sound came from the intercom. It was an unpleasant noise, like tuning an old radio.
Who's down there?
It was a woman's voice. The voice sounded young, but something about it was unnatural. There was a slight distortion, as if playing an old recording tape. "Michael, security," I replied. "Who is this?"
This is Diane from accounting. I apologize, but I'm quite busy right now. The new office isn't quite ready yet. I hope I'm not causing any inconvenience.
Accounting? In this derelict building? In the middle of the night? There seems to be a problem with the elevator, I said.
Access to the 5th floor is reserved for executives. The reception detected your entry. We're still moving important documents, so for security reasons, we cannot allow anyone else up here.
The explanation was logical, but questions remained. How did she know I had entered the elevator? There was no one at reception, and I saw no surveillance cameras. Understood. My apologies.
Thank you. Have a good night.
The intercom clicked off, and the elevator doors opened. The charred ozone smell was stronger inside the elevator. It was as if the smell was drifting down from the upper part of the elevator shaft. As I stepped out of the elevator, I looked up at the ceiling. I could see a faint, pale light leaking from the top of the shaft. It wasn't fluorescent light. It was colder and unnatural light, and illuminated by that light, I thought I saw a shadow moving. I tried to suppress my curiosity. One of the most important lessons I learned in the military was, don't ask too many questions. Extra questions lead to extra problems. But there was a clear contradiction between the building's condition and her explanation. That night, I patrolled floors 1 through 4. Each floor had the same layout, with several small offices. All were empty, and the furniture had been removed. Only the 4th floor was different. In one room, there were remnants of what looked like research equipment, dismantled computers, broken lab benches, and mysterious wiring attached to the walls. A closer look at the equipment on the 4th floor revealed that this was no ordinary office. Special tiles were used on the floor, a material resistant to chemicals. Emergency shower plumbing remained on the walls, indicating equipment for potential accidents. The surface of the lab benches showed signs of corrosion from strong acids. Did you notice the first rule? Never question the 5th floor resident. But at the time, I didn't yet understand that it was a rule. The next night, and the night after that, the lights on the 5th floor were on. I sometimes exchanged greetings via the intercom in the elevator, but Diane always seemed busy and avoided long conversations. Working late, are we? I'd ask, and she'd always reply in the same way.
I can concentrate better at night. I'll be done soon.
Her voice had a consistent pattern, always polite, yet distant. There was hardly any emotional fluctuation, as if she were reading from a script. A week passed, and her soon never came. I gradually began to understand her work pattern. The lights on the 5th floor would turn on around 9 p.m. and turn off around 4 a.m. During that time, I sometimes heard footsteps, irregular sound like something being moved on a cart. However, those footsteps had a strange characteristic. They weren't a normal human walking rhythm. They would occasionally stop or become unusually fast. It was as if something unaccustomed to walking was desperately trying to imitate human movement, and occasionally a metallic scratching sound would mix in. It sounded like claws dragging on the floor. Then, one night in the 2nd week, the first delivery arrived. Around 11 p.m., a white truck pulled into the parking lot. The truck had the logo of a medical equipment delivery company, Medical Supply Systems. 2 men got out and unloaded a long package on a cart. The package was about 6 feet long, covered in a hard plastic cover. From its shape, it was human-sized. One man, who seemed to be the veteran, worked efficiently, while the other, younger one, was a bit nervous. The veteran with the key card wheeled the cart into the elevator, while the younger one leaned against the wall and lit a cigarette.
New here?
The smoking man asked. I've been on security for this building for the past few weeks.
Right. It's been months since I've seen anyone here. I thought this place was shut down.
He took a deep drag from his cigarette and continued.
A few years ago, we used to deliver here regularly. Back then, though, we delivered to the basement. I heard deliveries stopped after an accident, but they started again a few months ago. This time, to the 5th floor.
Basement? I had never found basement access in the elevator. There's a basement in this building? The man pointed to another elevator.
You used to be able to get in from that one. Needed reception's permission, though.
Indeed, there was another pair of elevators on the opposite side of the lobby. My key card didn't activate them. Looking at that elevator's button panel, it showed up to be 2.
The basement was bigger.
The man continued.
Labs, operating rooms, and a huge cold storage unit. There were over 20 researchers. But now it's just the 5th floor. Just one person left, doing some kind of cleanup, apparently.
What kind of building was this before? The man looked around before lowering his voice and replying.
I think it was a medical research facility. I'm not sure exactly, but I heard they did work for universities or hospitals. Something to do with brain research.
Brain research. So they might need dead bodies. What about the accident?
I don't know the details, but one of the researchers supposedly went missing. That's when the building was shut down. It was a small mention in the local paper.
The elevator doors opened, and his partner came out, pushing an empty cart. His face was clouded.
Let's go home early tonight.
He said,
The boss upstairs is in a bad mood. The boss upstairs is in a bad mood.
The two exchanged brief goodbyes and left. As the truck exited the parking lot, the younger worker looked back at the building. Clear fear was etched on his face. That night, I explored the building in detail for the first time. The second, third, and fourth floors, all empty, a complete ruin. But on the fourth floor, I discovered a door to the emergency stairwell, perhaps another way to access the fifth floor. Curiosity led me to the emergency stairwell. My simple motivation was to meet Diane on the fifth floor directly. The stairwell was unusually cold, and the ozone smell was even more intense. Yellow radiation warning stickers, common in research facilities, were plastered on the walls, though most were peeling off. When I reached the fifth floor, there was a door leading to a corridor. The door was heavy metal with a reinforced glass peephole. I could peer into the corridor through the window. The corridor had the same structure as the other floors, but it wasn't completely empty. The cart brought by the delivery men was parked in front of the elevator. The corridor ceiling had a special ventilation system installed, unlike any other floor. Special tiles were used on the floor, seemingly a material resistant to chemicals. Emergency decontamination showers were installed on the walls, indicating equipment for some kind of accident. This was not a normal office floor. It was fully equipped as a research facility. I tried the doorknob, but it was locked from the inside. It seemed to be an electronic lock, with a key card reader installed, but my card didn't open it. Just then, I caught a movement in my peripheral vision. A woman stood by the cart. I could only see her back, but she had shoulder-length black hair and wore a black coat. It must be Diane. But something was unnatural. Her hands appeared unusually white. Was she wearing gloves, or was it her skin color? Her fingertips looked dark, and something seemed to be dripping from them. The shape of her hands was also strange, like broken pottery. She was taking something out of the cart. The plastic cover was open, and I could partially see the contents. Something like a human arm dangled, but the arm's color was unnatural, pale and bluish, as if it had been submerged in water for days. Even more terrifying, the arm wasn't completely still. It seemed to twitch slightly, like a corpse, yet some nerve activity remained. And when she touched the arm, a pale light ran across its surface. It seemed to be an electrical reaction. The sound of me pushing the door made her turn. I couldn't see her face clearly, but her skin was as white as snow, and where her eyes should have been, there were deep shadows. In the blink of an eye, she was gone. The cart remained, but there seemed to be dark liquid dripping marks on its surface. The plastic cover was closed again, and the contents were hidden. But on the floor, there were clear footprints. However, these footprints were not human. The toes were unusually long, and there were deep claw marks as if something had dragged its nails on the floor. I scrambled down the stairs, my heart pounding. This was no mere accountant working late. Something entirely different was happening. As I descended the stairs, I remembered my military training. In an incomprehensible situation, maintain distance. Don't directly confront an unexplainable enemy. Prioritize intelligence gathering. Avoid hasty actions. But I also remembered another military lesson. If civilians are in danger, you cannot abandon them. What if she was truly human, a victim of some experiment? But her appearance was clearly not human. Then what was she? This was the second rule. Never examine the delivery contents. But at the time, I still thought I could turn back. The following week, the second delivery arrived. The same truck, the same workers, but this time, 2 carts. The smoker again leaned against the wall, smoking and talking to me. But his demeanor was different from before. More nervous, frequently looking up at the 5th floor window.
Still here? This place is a bit too creepy for me. Too quiet. And the doctor isn't very sociable.
Doctor?
The woman upstairs. Dr. Carter, I think. I can't remember her exact name.
Diane from accounting? Or a doctor?
We call her the doctor, but I don't know her real title. The doctor who orders dead bodies.
The man continued. Dead bodies? My stomach churned.
Yeah, dead bodies. We usually deliver them to universities or hospitals for medical education, but this place is a bit different. The freshness requirement is unusually strict. They refuse anything that's not within 24 hours of death.
I stared at the carts. Beneath the plastic covers, human corpses lay. 2 carts meant 2 bodies tonight. Do you know why an accountant would order dead bodies? The man shrugged.
Beats me. But I met the doctor once a few years ago. She wasn't a people person. Unusually tall, always wore the same black coat. Her face.
He trailed off. What about her face?
Forget it. Probably just the lighting. But I don't know. She had skin like a doll, completely white, expressionless.
His partner returned from the elevator. His face was pale.
Let's get out of here quickly.
He said,
Something's different tonight. She's not normal.
What do you mean? I asked.
I saw her eating the bodies. No, more like sucking something out. I can't explain it, but it was abnormal.
I noticed the young worker's hands were trembling.
I never want to come here again.
He muttered.
But we have a contract.
The veteran replied.
We have to keep going for another 3 months. We'll just have to bear it. Though, just in case, I started carrying a self-defense cross. Don't know if it'll help, but...
The 2 quickly left. Even after the sound of the truck's engine faded, an eerie silence lingered in the parking lot. I was confused. Diane, the accountant? Dr. Carter? And why did she need dead bodies? But I couldn't ask questions. I already understood the 2 rules. That Friday, around 1 a.m., a black van pulled into the parking lot. The van had no company logo, and the men who emerged clearly weren't ordinary workers. 4 men got out. The driver was gaunt, with what looked like injection marks on his arm. He appeared to be a drug addict. The other 3 had similar appearances, clearly struggling with some kind of addiction. Looking into their car, I saw they had more than just tools in the back seat. Large bags, probably for carrying stolen goods. And on the driver's seat, there were multiple smartphones, likely for contacting buyers of stolen copper wire. They were part of an organized theft ring. They started pulling tools and bags from the van. Copper thieves, common criminals who steal metal from abandoned buildings to sell. I opened the door and stepped outside. Excuse me, this is private property. Please leave. The driver, pulling out a toolbox, replied indifferently.
Just stopping by. Don't worry.
I'm sorry, but please move your vehicle. The man approached me, a creepy grin on his face.
It's fine, old man. We're not breaking anything. Just borrowing some metal. This building's abandoned, right?
The man continued.
Nobody's using it. Nobody's getting hurt. Your salary's peanuts compared to the value of the copper here. Just pretend you didn't see anything.
The man took on a more threatening demeanor.
Besides, if anything happens out here in the middle of nowhere, no one will notice. You could disappear for days and no one would find you. We're used to this kind of work. Cooperate, and you won't get hurt. Resist, and
He gestured with a knife. He was clearly a criminal accustomed to violence. I'll call the police.
go ahead. It'll take them an hour to get here.
When his fist connected with my jaw, I realized I had lost a decade's worth of reflexes. It was an attack I could have easily dodged during my military days. Looking down at me as I lay on the ground, the man shouted,
Hurry! This place is a gold mine. Electrical panels, AC copper pipes, elevator cables. We can't carry it all in one night.
The man snatched my cell phone and, brandishing the knife, said,
Stay put, old man. Won't take long.
The other three entered the building, and I heard sounds of destruction. The cutting of metal, the breaking of walls. I had lost the will to resist. But then, the lights on the 5th floor flickered. I thought I saw a figure in the window, and the entire building vibrated slightly.
What is that?
The driver muttered. The vibration gradually grew stronger, and the building's window panes began to hum in resonance. Then, a mechanical sound came from the elevator shaft. The elevator was moving. His accomplices rushed out of the building's entrance in a panic. They ran and screamed as if being chased.
Hey, what happened?
The driver yelled.
It's her. A monster.
One of them yelled back.
She's not human.
The driver also turned around. Standing at the entrance was a woman in a long black coat. Despite the distance, her features were clearly visible. Her face was completely white, with a porcelain-like texture. Her eyes were jet black. No pupils were visible, and a pale light shimmered around her. Her very presence seemed to distort reality. The air around her rippled, and frost covered the ground, even though it was a July night. Only the area around her was cold, like winter. That ozone smell drifted outdoors for the first time. But this time it was more intense, hurting the back of my nose.
Hey, who are you?
The driver snarled, brandishing his knife. The woman didn't answer. She just advanced silently. Her walk was unnatural. She made no sound, as if gliding across the ground. The laws of gravity seemed not to apply to her movements. Even as she advanced slowly, a kind of afterimage phenomenon occurred. It was as if multiple versions of her existed simultaneously. As she advanced, the surrounding vegetation began to wither. The sparse weeds in the parking lot turned black, and the leaves on nearby trees began to fall. It was as if she was draining the very life force from them.
Back off.
The man raised his knife, but the woman didn't stop. When she raised her hand, pale electrical discharges surged from her fingertips. The air crackled with electricity, and my hair stood on end.
I warned you.
The moment the man swung his knife, a burst of light flashed with a popping sound. There was a sound like an insect being electrocuted, and the man vanished without a trace. All that remained was the smell of burning and a burnt, human-shaped outline on the ground. His accomplices jumped into the van and sped away. As the van left, the smell of burning tires mixed with the night air. The woman looked down at me. Her eyes were deep, like the darkness of the universe. But I felt no hostility. Rather, it was a gaze of evaluation. In that gaze, for a fleeting moment, I saw a human emotion, loneliness, exhaustion, and a deep craving for something. She was indeed a monster, but at the same time, she was a being who had once been human. The remnants of that humanity seemed to empathize with me, as a being who was equally lonely and had equally lost something. Once the van was completely out of sight, she vanished. In the blink of an eye, no one was there. Only the scorch mark on the ground proved that what had happened was real. This was the third rule. Never interfere with her work. And I understood. There was something she was protecting, and those who intruded upon her domain would receive no mercy. The next night, I returned to the building. I could have submitted my resignation to my boss, but it wouldn't have been right to leave without saying thank you. As a soldier, I always honored those who saved my life. That was my conviction, but that wasn't all. My perception of her had changed after last night's events. She was certainly not human, but she wasn't malevolent either. Rather, she seemed like a being carrying some burden of responsibility, fighting a lonely battle. It was similar to the loneliness of a soldier who had lost comrades on the battlefield. When I pressed the button for the 5th floor in the elevator, the intercom activated as usual, but this time there was less static noise.
I'm glad you're back, Michael.
Diane's voice sounded more human than usual.
I wanted to thank you for last night. Thank you. Oh, that. Don't worry about it. I prefer to avoid such disturbances, but sometimes necessary measures must be taken.
A slight weariness tinged her voice. It sounded as if she had been carrying a heavy responsibility for a long time. That weariness wasn't merely physical exhaustion. It was a deeper, soul-level fatigue. The pain of continuing to be something she wasn't for many years. The burden of trying to retain her humanity, and an unending sense of loneliness. All of it was conveyed in her voice.
Many people would think I'm a monster.
She continued.
They wouldn't be wrong. I am no longer human, but I still have memories of when I was human. The judgment of good and evil, emotions. It's just that my body has become this way.
I've never seen an accountant do something like that. But you're not really an accountant, are you? After a moment of silence, she replied,
No, but talking about my work is complicated and difficult to explain to people. However, my work here will be finished soon. I'll be gone by tomorrow night.
Her voice held a slight relief mixed with deep sadness. The relief of a long struggle ending, and at the same time, the sense of loss of something important. For her, the completion of this work might have been both liberation and the severing of her last human connection. Is the work you mentioned research? Another silence. This time, longer and more oppressive.
A kind of restoration work. A long interrupted research project needs to be properly concluded. It cannot be left in an unsafe state.
Is it related to the accident a few years ago? The missing researcher?
You're well informed.
A hint of surprise entered her voice.
Yes, it is related. In fact, the missing researcher was me.
My blood ran cold. The missing researcher, the accident a few years ago, and the being now here. So, you're dead?
Dead. Alive. Those concepts don't apply to my current state. Through the experiment, I transitioned to a different state of being. Brain dead, yet consciousness remains. My body is, as you've seen.
The delivered bodies. They were what she needed to sustain her existence. So, if someone breaks in again, you won't be here?
I'm afraid not. I hope your employer will increase security in the future. This place is too lonely to be alone. Just knowing someone was here made the job easier.
For a moment, her voice carried a hint of emotion, a fleeting warmth. A touch of humanity seemed to return for just a second. The silence in that moment was filled with deep, unspoken emotion. Perhaps for many years, she hadn't had a proper human conversation. Lonely days with only simple greetings and professional exchanges. In such a life, our brief interaction might have been a precious validation of her humanity, proof that human feelings still remained within her.
It's been a long time since I had a proper conversation. Even our brief interaction meant a lot to me. If you'd like, how about a drink downstairs? It's my last night.
That's a tempting offer, but unfortunately, I can't come down. But will that offer remain valid? Perhaps one day I can accept it. One day. I didn't know what she meant, but I promised.
Of course. I'll always be waiting. Thank you, Michael. I was lucky to meet someone like you. One last piece of advice.
What is it?
There are still dangers remaining in this place. In the underground research facility, there are other test subjects besides me. If there are future security guards assigned to this building, tell them never to go near the basement. No one can control them once I'm gone.
Underground test subjects. She wasn't the only one. What kind of test subjects?
Beings like me, but they couldn't retain consciousness. Only their instincts remain, and they are extremely dangerous. You could call them failed experiments. They are starving.
Her voice darkened.
They've been without a nutrient source for 3 years, so they're very aggressive. If anyone goes into the basement, they'll attack immediately. And once attacked, you won't be able to escape.
A faint noise began to come from the intercom.
It's time. Goodbye, Michael. Take care.
You too, Diane. This was our last conversation. The next night, the elevator ascended to the 5th floor without resistance. No voice came from the intercom, and when the doors opened, a desolate floor appeared. The ozone smell still lingered faintly, but it was weaker than before. Most of the offices were empty, and only the empty carts that had carried the bodies remained. Not a single body was found. Walking around the 5th floor, traces of her presence remained everywhere. There were electrical scorch marks on the floor and handprints on the walls, but they weren't human handprints. The fingers were unusually long, and the claw marks were deep. In one room, there was what looked like a temporary office setup. Several computers were installed, but all seemed disabled. Hard drives had been removed and important data erased. Research notes were scattered on the desk. Most of the pages were torn out, but from the remaining fragments, I could infer the outline of the research. Words like brain activity maintenance, post-mortem consciousness preservation, and neural interface were visible. On the floor was a damaged case, with the faint inscription BCIMK6 readable on its side. It stood for Brain-Computer Interface. It was disassembled, and important parts had been removed. Near the wall, there were traces of specialized medical equipment. Something like a life support system had been installed, with multiple outlets and wiring remaining. As I approached the window, I saw handprints on the glass. The unusually long finger marks were clearly not human. Around the handprints, there were frost-like crystals. The strangest thing was the freezer in the corner of the room. It was a large medical freezer, still running, but it was empty. Dark stains remained on the inner walls, and I dreaded to imagine what had been stored there. Checking the freezer's thermometer, I saw it was set to an abnormally low temperature, far below the usual setting for a medical freezer, at liquid nitrogen levels. This wasn't for preserving human tissue. It might have been for something more specialized, perhaps to stabilize her mutated tissue. And at the bottom of the freezer, there were traces of a pale, glowing liquid. Was it her blood, or a completely different substance? Later, my boss Jim contacted me. He said there was no Diane from accounting in that building. The building was completely abandoned, and no one was supposed to be working there. More interestingly, the owner of the building had been missing for 3 years. I had already understood that. Now you know the 3 rules. When you're on night security, remember, Rule #1, never question the upstairs resident. Rule #2, never examine the delivery contents. Rule #3, never interfere with her work. I still wish that woman well. I don't know what she was trying to accomplish, but I hope she succeeded. And if possible, I hope to meet her again someday. She must have far more interesting stories than I do. Sometimes, during a night shift, I catch the smell of electricity, a faint scent of ozone. When I do, I think of her. Perhaps she's living as a new being somewhere, or perhaps she has finally found peace. Either way, I hope she found her peace. However, if you ever find yourself on a night security job alone, I strongly advise you to remember these 3 rules. And there's one more important thing. If you find traces of medical equipment in an old building, leave immediately. There's always a reason why research was halted. You don't need to know that reason. Not knowing will save your life. Some things are better left unknown. But once you know, you have no choice but to live by those rules. Finally, a warning from me to you. Having heard this story, you might not be able to have a normal night shift anymore, because you've learned that unexplained things exist in the world. The suspicion that something might be beyond the darkness will always linger. Still, if you ever take a night security job, remember this story and follow the 3 rules. Your life might depend on it.